Is Klaus Schwab being ousted as the head of the World Economic Forum? We're going to be talking about that on this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. But before we do talk about any of that, I always have to put out that message for everyone that's tuning into this program that you can really help us out by just doing a couple of things. Won't cost you a penny, only it'll cost you a couple of seconds, and that is hitting that subscribe button, sharing this content, hitting the like button, even leaving a comment under this video. All helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. So, with that said, out of the way, I am Donald Kendal, joined by Justin Haskins. Justin, how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing pretty well.
Great.
Yeah, it's been busy lately, but things been good.
Not bad. Yeah, well, we've done a couple of videos as of late, but this one has been kind of in my short list of videos that I wanted to do with you for a while now. So this is an article that is currently featured towards the top of stoppingsocialism.com. It is about one of our favorite people in the universe, Klaus Schwab. Or wait, what's the opposite of favorite? Klaus Schwab, the head founder, CEO of the World Economic Forum, the biggest proponents of the Great Reset and ESG and stakeholder capitalism and all these different things that we talk about endlessly on Justin and Donald Save America and Stopping Socialism TV. So this article grabbed my attention. Klaus Schwab's time may be almost up. So if you go through this article, and I want to read through some of this with you. It says, World Economic Forum WEF chairman Klaus Schwab, who has run the organization since its foundation in the early 1970s, may be a target of a mutiny. According to The Guardian, I can click on that article and we can go through that article as well. A group of current and former WEF members contacted them saying, quote, Schwab was a law unto himself and has surrounded himself with nobodies who were incapable of running the organization, end quote. This group, which has remained anonymous, stated, quote, Klaus has been at the helm of the World Economic Forum for 52 years. When he was born in 1938, 122 of the 195 states in the world right now did not even exist. He is completely unaccountable to anyone inside or outside of the organization. Members of the emerging group have attempted to air their concerns on social media, but claim the World Economic Forum pressured social media companies to remove them, Justin. They claim that they are, quote, hesitant to come forward as Klaus is very well connected and can make life very difficult for us even after we leave the Economic Forum. Also, according to this, some of these quotes, it says further, Klaus picks his leaders using a criteria Putin uses to pick deputies for the State Duma: loyalty, guile, and sex appeal, which makes all the sense in the world once you realize that he has John Kerry and Al Gore next to him for some of these conferences. But so it goes through and it just kind of explains that, supposedly there is a group of people in the World Economic Forum that aren't too happy with Klaus Schwab's reign as the head of the organization. So, Justin, initial thoughts. We can dive into some of this a little bit more detail, but I guess initial questions are just thoughts right off the top. And do you think that there is a mutiny forming behind this guy?
So, just real sort of anecdotally about at least the part where the World Economic Forum's digital people might be pressuring companies to stop, stifle speech against Klaus Schwab. I know from personal experience that does happen.
Right.
Because I've had high level people at the head of the World Economic Forum, not Klaus himself, but high level people go to publications that I've written for and say, you need to remove this.
Right.
In the context of the Great Reset and other things. So we know that happens. That sounds very true. In fact, I would argue that kind of lends some credibility to what they're saying, I would think, because I know that that's true. And that not something you would necessarily make up if you're in their situation. So that I think is interesting.
Wait. To further elaborate on that story, because if anyone's watching this and don't know, we might have talked about it in previous episodes. I won't say any names or anything, but yes, you had a very well-shared article in a very well-known publication, and editors
That was
came to
not
you.
a conservative publication.
Sure. Editors came to you and said, yeah, we had, I don't know if they said specifically who reached out, but that
They
they,
did.
they identified these things as being not right. Right. And so the editors were like working with this other person, came up with potential solutions and wanted to run these solutions past you to basically make these objectors happy. And you and I had a conversation about this and whether or not we should relent on any of it. And I remember very, very adamantly making the case, no, do not let them
Yeah.
change a word of that article. And they
In
didn't.
Yes, in the dispute centered around one of the things that they were complaining about. A very high level person at the WEF went to this publication and said, this part of the article where Justin says that the United Nations was part of the launch of the Great Reset campaign, that's not true. And because of that, the article should be pulled, basically, is what they were arguing. And the publication, to their credit, was like, we're not pulling the article, but we might, we're open to revising it, And so they wanted to revise it. And they claim that that's factually untrue. Of course, it's not. The World Economic Forum and the United Nations were working together on that. The technicality part of it was officially it was a World Economic Forum only, campaign, but the United Nations was there at the event. They were promoting it with them, so it was just,
but there was three things like that, but yes, but your larger point was
things like that. And they were stupid. They were stupid things, but yes, we did talk about it. And I agreed with you. I said no, because they wanted to include at the top text that said something. They didn't just want to make the change and then we move on, because I probably would have been okay with that, just because it was a pointless change anyway to the article. But that was the reason they wanted to do it, was because at the top there would then add text that says this article has been revised, blah, 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 suggesting something in it had been inaccurate.
Correct.
When nothing in it had been inaccurate.
Exactly.
And that was the whole point of them trying to get this correction. So we talked about it and you said, nope, don't do it. And I told them no. I said, nope, I don't agree to this. This is not inaccurate. It's accurate. Here are the sources. And they went back to them and there was back and forth. And eventually they basically said, we won't change anything.
Yeah.
And so
you brought that up all in the context of like, we know from personal experience that Klaus Schwab types, him and his lackeys that surround him, would go and do these things that are being suggested in this article.
Right. And then, so the other thing that kind of, comes, I'm not surprised. I would imagine that probably a lot of people who have been in his position at gigantic organizations for this long probably do have, you're in that position for a reason, and they do pick the leadership around them and stuff to make sure that they got people who are on their side. And then there's political in every one of these big organizations. And so there's a degree of all of that. But my big takeaway from this is it a coincidence that this kind of story is coming out now in the wake of the Great Reset disaster and how embarrassing that was for them?
We should probably elaborate on that too.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest, the Great Reset as a campaign, as a slogan, was one of the biggest marketing failures, blunders of all time, because it got them so much negative press, that an overwhelming amount of negative press, you almost never see that happen, especially for an organization like this, and they've been around forever. And so you got to wonder, is all the bad press that they're getting, a lot of it is tied up with the Great Reset? Is that really what the motivation is here? Is it sort of like, what? We kind of don't like him personally. He's a jerk. Maybe he's a bad manager. He's kind of a jerk to people or whatever. and a prima donna and all this other stuff, got a god complex. We all already knew that. But maybe the real thing is he's making us look really, really bad. He's making this organization a toxic place to be. And I don't want to be associated with this. This guy is the one leading us in this terrible direction. I gotta wonder, because it was such a bad moment for them in terms of the marketing.
No, that's a good point. And again, people that are very familiar with our show might have heard us talk about this. For those that are just tuning in for like, our commentary for the first time, I do want to elaborate on that a little bit. So the Great Reset, if you're, unaware, you shouldn't be. Go and tune into any of our other episodes and talk about it. But the backbone of the Great Reset, environmental, social, and governance standards, metrics, all of that, ESG. If you heard about ESG, that is the backbone of the Great Reset. And it was a thing that existed far prior to anyone talking about the Great Reset. The infrastructure for all this ESG stuff has been established over years, maybe even decades. I don't even know. But it all flew under the radar. And people that did talk about it, it was, page 12 news. Nobody shared it. It was just investment type jargon. Nobody cared about ESG. And it wasn't until the World Economic Forum coined the phrase, the Great Reset. We didn't make that up. Conservatives didn't make that up. Tucker Carlson didn't make up the Great Reset. The World Economic Forum made up that phrase, and it was so sinister sounding that it caught Justin's attention. Justin told me about it. I said, yeah, we should make hay out of this. One thing led to another, and we're Justin's co-authoring a book.
Launched. This was literally like a week or so before the actual official launch. They were sending out press statements hyping up the launch of this thing, and that was when we saw it and started talking about some of the stuff that was just in the press materials.
Right. And one thing led to another. Justin, you're co-authoring a book with Glenn Beck about the Great Reset, and the term the Great Reset goes viral in conservative sphere. And it got so bad and so much bad press, like you were saying, directed towards the World Economic Forum and anyone that's promoting this ESG type stuff, that they literally had to issue an apology saying, yeah, we probably shouldn't have called it the Great Reset. I'm not even joking. This isn't an exaggeration. You could find videos on our channel of us talking about their apology video. It's unbelievable. And they've since run away from the term the Great Reset. Recently, they had a conference talking about all the stuff that's involved in the Great Reset, but instead of calling it the Great Reset, they called it like the Davos agenda or something like that. Not a better term, but definitely not as sinister sounding as the Great Reset. So your point is that was such a blunder, such an unforced error on their part, that maybe the person that was pushing that and we need to make this look radical and awesome and all encompassing might have been Klaus Schwab. So it's like, maybe you're undermining the goals that the organization has by your bombastic nature.
Well, and we know that Klaus Schwab was it's not as though Klaus Schwab was dragged kicking and screaming into that slogan. We know that because he wrote a book.
Oh, yes.
Called The Great Reset.
He did.
So he liked it enough to write a book about it and to call it that on the book, or I should say to have someone else write a book about it, and then he adds his name to it after the fact, which is probably what happened. But that's definitely what went on, right? So Klaus Schwab clearly liked it. He used it. They didn't run away from it right away. They stuck with it for a few months.
Sure.
And even though the press was bad, even though people like us were talking to other people who were more, influential, and it was starting to get traction and it was all over the place and it was getting embarrassing, they stuck with it. And then at the very end, when it came time to do the actual event of, I don't remember what year that would be, early 2021, I guess, that was when they said they suddenly were backing away from it, and they started using other things. They created the apology video for that conference that they had, the virtual conference, and all this other stuff. They were going to have a whole event themed the Great Reset.
It kept getting delayed by COVID.
Yep, kept getting delayed by COVID. And so they were going to have a whole event themed around Great Reset, and they ran away from that, instead made an apology video in early 2021 or 2022. I can't remember. And so that's amazing. That's a huge reversal. Right. And for an organization like that to be that badly embarrassed. And then the other thing is this whole organization is it's an organization built around the idea that they're going to connect influential people with other influential people. Like that's what it is, right? So their value is entirely their reputation.
Exactly.
I mean, that's it, pretty
Yeah.
much. That's the main value. If their reputation is garbage, then there's really no reason for them to exist. The whole thing
Right.
will fall apart very quickly. And they've been around for a long time, and that hasn't been a problem for them. And now all of a sudden, it's a big problem for them. Because if
Right.
you're a CEO of some company or a politician or whatever, you got to at least think twice. Even if you agree with them about everything, you got to at least think twice before associating yourself with them. Because do you really want all that stuff, baggage that comes with it? Is it worth it? And for a lot of them, it still is. But
Sure.
the price that you have to pay is a lot bigger than it was like 3 years ago when it wasn't that big of a price at all.
Yeah.
So I don't think I don't think it's crazy to say that there are people in the organization saying this was so stupid and this guy needs to go. He's old and he's been there forever and he's a tyrant and this organization is running off a cliff holding this guy's hand. We got to get rid of this guy. I totally buy that as a possibility.
Yeah, I want to bring up because you're referencing some other things that I don't know if anyone's familiar with. This article from Vanity Fair came out about a year ago, and it's basically an expose about Klaus Schwab and the way he runs this organization, and how he's like a tyrant when it comes to certain things, and basically how this entire plan of what the World Economic Forum is and these Davos conferences are basically just to like rub elbows with, famous people. It talks about, him posing for photos with Bono and photos congratulating Bill Gates on his philanthropic exploits and all this different stuff. And there's even examples in here where he talks about how like one day there was an employee of the World Economic Forum that was running late to a meeting. So she went and parked in his parking spot, knowing that he was on the other side of the world on some other business trip or something. And when he found out that she did that, she wanted that Klaus Schwab wanted that employee fired. So like there's a bunch of different examples of that and how this is, how he just, like you were saying, how all of this is just reputation building and being able to get a bunch of this very influential people or organizations or companies or whatever to chip in some money and be able to tout that they're members of this group that are trying to save the world. And some people might call it a grift, some people might call it a money-making scheme. Others say that he's trying to save the world. But like you were saying, if the reputation is in the dumpster, then what are these people paying for? You're paying this money so that you can be associated with a group that looks like they're trying to put everyone in smart cities and control the world through ESG and these like secret diabolical plans to conquer the world. I don't want to be associated with that. So yeah, I do kind of wonder if this is if Klaus Schwab, rightfully or not, is being seen in the organization as the figurehead of that kind of diabolical reputation that the World Economic Forum is getting. Now, let me ask you this, Justin. I mean, obviously, we've probably been the top 5 of people that have talked about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset and all of this prior to any of that work. Like, were you familiar with the World Economic Forum? Like at all, really?
I had heard of Davos as just a thing. That it
Exactly.
was like a conference and that people didn't like it because lots of powerful people went to it. That was pretty much it. I'd never heard of anything, any of their ideas. I didn't know anything about it. I assumed it was really just sort of it always kind of had a reputation of almost being like the far left-wing people didn't like it because
Sure.
it was this, sort of extravagant affair. Like it was offensive because of how rich all these people were coming together. And for that reason, it was like the wealth was just the idea that all these wealthy people would all go to this place and talk about the issues of the day is just offensive on its face because of how wealthy they are. And look at how, terrible capitalism is. And that was sort of the thing that I took away from it. That was my biggest thing.
Mhm.
I mean, the World Economic Forum, which is what hosts Davos, I'd never heard of. I don't think
Yeah,
I'd ever
ditto.
heard of that.
Right, ditto.
It just
So
wasn't a thing, and
so I
we're in
know that
public
it
policy. I mean,
right.
we've been doing this for a while. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
It just kind of flew under the radar. They were able to
Mhm.
host these conferences, these lavish conferences, bringing together all these people all over the world, and people still didn't know their name. And now, after all of this wave of different stuff that, we've been at the forefront of, like, the World Economic Forum has entered the conservative lexicon. Like,
Mhm.
you ask anybody that tunes into the Blaze or Fox News or just goes to conservative news websites and at all basis, not even a consistent basis, at all basis, and they will know what the World Economic Forum is. They know what the Great Reset is, and they have an idea of what ESG is. And I think that this is all working to completely undermine their biggest strength, which was flying under the radar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. Do you think that Klaus Schwab will be ousted from this organization?
I mean, I think it's entirely possible.
He'll resign in
Um,
disgrace.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine because he's been there for so long, and it's just like I don't know. I don't know if it's even possible organizationally. The board of directors there is, all. I'm sure he was heavily involved in all of them being selected as part of that, and it is possible. It's always possible, but I think it's probably more likely that he just retires at some point or dies than it is
Yeah.
that he actually gets thrown out because he's already kind of old, and I just don't see him
Well, no, no, no. I
being
don't think he'll
thrown
be
out.
I don't think he'll be thrown out. But if he just like happens to retire, you know, I'll wonder, was that on his own volition
Yes.
or
Yeah.
was
No,
somebody
because
pushing
yeah,
him to do
there's
that?
there's no doubt about it. If he retires, that will be the question because of these kinds of stories. It has to be the question. Was he forced out? And if he is being forced out, it would have to be with the approval of the board of directors
Sure.
and or the board of trustees there. And the board of trustees is super super powerful influential people. These are well known, many of them famous people. These are like for example, Al Gore is on the board of directors, or at least he was recently. I'm not sure if he still is or not, but um, you know, the CEOs of BlackRock, like Larry Fink, he's on the
Mhm.
board of directors,
Mm.
right? It's these kinds of very influential. They have artists on the board of directors. Yo Yo Ma is on the board of was on the board of directors at one point, right? So these are influential people, but these are people who care about their reputations, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
They're not just like ideological people who are there because they believe in the cause and that's it. These are people who are famous people, a lot of them. And because they're famous and because they're well connected in business and Hollywood and all these other things, they would be the kind of people who would say, if you're ruining our reputation, you got to go. Like I could see that because if you're the CEO of Salesforce, which is one of the wealthiest companies in the world, and that the CEO of Salesforce, a guy named Mark Benioff, is on the board of trustees at the World Economic Forum. If you're him, you don't want to be affiliated with an organization that's dragging your reputation through the mud. You're the CEO of a major corporation. You can't have that. So, I mean, you can see here, right? Like,
Right.
um, you've
Larry
got
Fink.
Christina Freeland as a politician in Canada, close ally of Justin Trudeau. You have Christina Georgieva. She's at the International Monetary Fund. If you're watching on YouTube, you'd be able to see we're showing some of the people. Christine Lagarde. She's the head of the European Central Bank, kind of like the Fed for. See, Yo-Yo Ma, he's still on there.
Yo
Phyllis.
Yo Ma.
Yep, Yo-Yo Ma. And so there are, these are
Oh,
powerful, powerful people. David Rubenstein is the head of the Carlyle Group.
head of
I
Nestle.
mean, head of Nestle. Yep.
Apparently, Nestle is not a well liked company on the internet. So
No.
that's interesting that their CEO is on the board of the
Yes.
World Economic Forum.
Yes. Julie Sweet, the head of Accenture, another very powerful company. So I mean, these are not nobodies. These are people who care about their reputation. They're not just yes
Right.
men. They
Right.
may have an affiliation. They may have a loyalty to Klaus Schwab. They may like him or agree with him or be friends with him or whatever. but they also have reputations and careers of their own, and they don't want that to be thrown in the trash because of something that Klaus Schwab did. So it is possible, but it's hard to imagine in a way, I think, just because of how powerful he is, and also because a lot of the complaints about Klaus Schwab in terms of management and stuff like that, Board of Trustees doesn't care about that. You think
Sure.
Al Gore cares if the staff is mad at Klaus Schwab because he's mean to them or whatever? No.
Right.
Al Gore does not care. He probably likes him more for that, you know? He's like,
I don't
hey,
know,
oh,
man.
Klaus, I'm mean to my staff too. You know, like that's probably he probably likes that. So I don't know. I think you gotta put that all into context. So unless the reputations are being threatened, and they are, but are they being threatened enough?
Right.
That's the question.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so far, that hasn't been the case. But could it happen? Yeah, it could. Another Great Reset type thing that would probably be enough to sink them, I would think.
Yeah, no kidding. And the other there's several things when it comes to Klaus Schwab that I feel like are just kind of X factors. One of those being that he's not just like the next stand-in as the CEO, like he is the founder. This is his brainchild. All of the stuff comes from Klaus Schwab. In fact, the Vanity Fair article says starts off saying that what does it say? That there's like a quote in here pretty early on that says that he is like he for whatever reason he just has like it in him that he can pick like the next hot thing in the world or something like that. And but he's got like a bunch of eccentric interests. One of the other things you mentioned the book that he wrote, the Great Reset, but he also wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, where he talks about all this crazy technology that's in the future. Like he is an amateur futurist when it comes to this. And you could hear him talking about, there's clips of him talking about like, one day, are we all going to have chips in our brains and all of this? And it's like, it's an interesting thing to talk about when you're amongst friends, but when you're the lead, you're the head of the World Economic Forum, there's clips of you talking about people getting chips embedded in their brains. Like that's just, like, do you want to be associated with that? Does the head of Nestle want to be associated with a group that's talking about putting chips in people's brains? Whether or not he's condoning it or anything like that, but he's still talking about it. So
still talking about it.
Nobody
and
can
what's
say,
and what's the upside? See, the upside was always there because they got the connections and everything. There was really very little downside. But now with the downside, and why was Klaus Schwab talking about chips in people's brains and stuff like that? Because he probably was talking about that for a long time and nobody cared.
right.
And over time he got used to this idea of I can say whatever I want,
Sure.
and it'll be fine. And just for whatever reason, the Great Reset opened up this door. It's opened up Pandora's box to everything that these people are doing. And we finally realized, no, these people are not just having elaborate meetings and nothing happens.
Right.
They're actually doing things.
Yes.
And they are actually coordinating, and they are using the same slogans, and they are using all of the same ideas, and it is spreading throughout Europe and America, and it in North America, and it is authoritarian. And it's and once we realized that there was more to it than just, oh, these people go to Davos and who cares? They're just talking to each other and they don't do anything. It's like, no, they actually are.
Right.
And the Great Reset opened the door for that. And
Yes.
so, it's kind of like, it's not just a bad marketing slogan. It's also like you shined light on what we were doing in secret.
Right.
It's like the first guy who accidentally lets slip what's going on in the secret society. Like, what are you doing? Stop.
Rule number one was not talking about Fight Club, and you're going out there and you're talking about it.
Right. And they had always talked about it out in the open, but not in a way that was so diabolical sounding that would cause anyone to pay attention to it. They were getting away with it. That's the thing. They were getting away with it. And then the very last minute, they picked the worst marketing slogan of all time and people started to pay attention.
So here's my prediction. In the next couple of years, you will see Klaus Schwab exit the organization.
Wow.
And there will be this aura of like, oh, we're reassessing our priorities and we want to make sure that we're doing everything above board type of way. And it's going to serve as like a don't pay attention to us. We're just an academic organization. We're just getting together with influential people and the whole stakeholder idea just to come up with some academic white papers that we're going to put out there. Don't pay attention to us. And that's all going to be kicked off by getting rid of Klaus Schwab. I usually don't want to make predictions on a podcast like this, but I can kind of see that happening.
Well, I would agree with you. How old do you think he is? I looked up his age, so I know how old he is. How old do you think he is?
I mean, I want to say like 80, but maybe he's like 75.
Okay. See, I would have thought, yeah, I think I was leaning high 70s. He's 84.
84. Wow.
So there's a pretty good chance he's not going to be there in a few years.
Yeah, so
kinda
that
no
makes my
matter what.
prediction easier to make because, if he was like some
So I agree with you.
42-year-old guy, it's like,
Right.
well, he could
So,
be
I
doing
mean,
this
you
for
never
another
know. I
couple
mean, George
decades.
Soros is still, puttering around, and he's in his
At the
90s.
ripe old age of 142, I think.
Yeah, he's 90s. He's in his 90s. So I think that, and he'll never die because they'll just keep reanimating him and
Yeah.
they'll just put him in the reanimation chamber and he'll just keep
Right.
coming back. Or download him into a computer. But I think that Klaus Schwab, pretty good chance he's gone from the World Economic Forum within a few years. I think that's good. Fair bet.
All right, well, let us know what you think. Like I said, those different things that you can do to help out our channel, hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, hitting that share button if you like this content, hitting the like button, or just leaving a comment under the video telling us what you think about this. Do you think that Klaus Schwab is going to be exiting? Do you think that there's a growing reputational risk associated with the World Economic Forum and Davos that's going to undermine the influence that this organization has? I'm very curious to know what you think. And Justin, any last words, anything you want to get off your chest before we sign off for the day?
Nope.
I didn't think so. All right. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. We will talk with you next time.